Something big has changed in Toronto, and Leafs fans may not be ready for what comes next. After missing the playoffs for the first time in a decade, the Maple Leafs didn't just make a few small moves, they changed the team from top to bottom. And now, with Gavin McKenna leading a new generation, the real question is, what are the Leafs building? The Toronto Maple Leafs are entering a season that could change the direction of the entire franchise. After years of chasing the Stanley Cup with the same basic core, Toronto missed the playoffs for the first time since 2016. The team finished good for 8th place in the Atlantic Division. That failure forced the organization to make some very serious changes. And the biggest change may have started at the top. Toronto brought in John Chayka as general manager and added Hockey Hall of Famer Mats Sundin as a senior executive advisor. The new group quickly made it clear that they were not interested in simply repeating the past. They wanted a new direction, and the roster began changing fast. Then came the moment that gave Leafs fans something they had not felt in a long time: hope. Toronto won the first overall pick in the 2026 NHL draft and used it to select Gavin McKenna. The 18-year-old forward is now one of the biggest names in the new Leafs' future. Before entering the NHL, McKenna had already built an impressive record. He scored 129 points in 56 WHL games in 2025 and won CHL Player of the Year. He later played at Penn State and recorded 51 points in 35 games during the 2026 season. But Toronto did not stop with McKenna. The Leafs also made major changes in goal and on defense. Sergei Bobrovsky signed a 3-year contract and is expected to become Toronto's starting goalie. Darren Raddysh arrived from Tampa Bay after a career-best season when he scored 22 goals and recorded 70 points in 73 games. Nick Paul was also added to bring more size and flexibility to the forward group. That means this is not simply the old Maple Leafs team with one new superstar prospect. The expected lineup shows a very different look. McKenna could start alongside John Tavares and William Nylander, while Bobrovsky could take over in net. Raddysh is expected to play an important role on the power play, while players such as Auston Matthews are being asked to take another step. That is why Sergei Bobrovsky may be one of the most important pieces of this whole plan. Toronto signed the 2-time Vezina Trophy winner to a 3-year contract on July 1. Bobrovsky is coming off a rough season in Florida, where he posted a .877 save percentage in 52 games. But he has also won 2 Stanley Cups with the Panthers, and Toronto is betting that the veteran goalie can return to his best form. Toronto also added Darren Raddysh to change the way its defense can attack. Raddysh had a breakout 2025 season with Tampa Bay, scoring 22 goals and 70 points in 73 games. 10 of those goals came on the power play. Toronto now expects him to become an important power play quarterback. If he can bring that same offense to Toronto, the Leafs could finally have another dangerous weapon from the blue line. Then there is Nick Paul. He is not being brought in to become the biggest star on the team. His value is different. Paul can play both wing and center, and Toronto expects him to help in the middle six. The Leafs traded goalie Dennis Hildeby, plus future draft picks, to Tampa Bay to get him. It shows that Toronto wanted more size, flexibility, and experience throughout the lineup. And then we come back to Gavin McKenna. The first overall pick is only 18 years old, so there should not be unrealistic pressure on him to save the Maple Leafs by himself. But the opportunity is enormous. Toronto expects him to compete for a top 6 role, and NHL.com has projected him on a line with John Tavares and William Nylander. That could give McKenna 2 experienced stars around him while he learns the NHL game. McKenna's background is also a major reason why fans are so excited. Before joining Toronto, he put up huge numbers in junior hockey and then recorded 51 points in 35 games at Penn State. He also won CHL Player of the Year after scoring 129 points in 56 WHL games during the 2024 season. Those numbers do not guarantee NHL success, but they explain why Toronto believes it has something special. The rest of the young group could be just as important. Auston Matthews is expected to take another step, while other young players and prospects give Toronto more options than it had before. The organization is no longer depending only on its older stars. it now has to develop this younger group while still trying to win immediately. That creates the most interesting part of the entire story. Toronto has not completely abandoned its veteran core. Auston Matthews, William Nylander, John Tavares, and Morgan Rielly are still major pieces. Instead, the Leafs have added younger talent, more size, a new starting goalie, and more offensive help from defense. It is a very different mix from the team that failed to reach the playoffs. The Atlantic Division is extremely tough, and several teams have improved during the offseason. Toronto cannot afford another slow start. Bobrovsky has to deliver. Raddysh has to prove his big season was real. McKenna has to adjust to the NHL. And the team's biggest stars have to stay healthy and perform when the pressure rises. It is about whether Toronto's biggest reset in years can finally create a team that looks different when the games matter most. And if McKenna becomes the player Toronto believes he can be, the Leafs may have just started building something much bigger than anyone expected. Toronto Maple Leafs brought John Tavares home with a deal that changed everything. But years later, that contract has created a battle nobody expected. Tavares is now taking the stand and explaining what happened when the agreement was made. But there is a major disagreement over what that deal really meant, and the answer could shock Leafs fans. John Tavares came to Toronto as one of the biggest free agents in NHL history. He signed a 7-year contract worth $77 million with the Maple Leafs on July 1, 2018. It was a massive moment for Toronto because Tavares was not just any player. He was a star center, a former Islanders captain, and one of the most wanted players on the market. But hidden inside that huge contract was something that has now created a major legal fight. Tavares received a US $15.25 million signing bonus in 2018. His legal team says that payment was a key part of why he chose Toronto. They argue it was an inducement to sign with the Leafs, not normal salary for playing hockey. Here is where the story gets complicated. Under the Canada-US tax treaty, certain payments made to athletes as an inducement to sign a contract can receive a maximum tax rate of 15%. Tavares says his 2018 payment fits that rule. His lawyers also say he was a US resident when the bonus was paid, and that he spent only 45 days in Canada between September 13 and the end of 2018. The tax agency says the payment should not get that special treatment. Its position is that the money was really salary, wages, or other employment income. That difference is huge because it changes how much tax Tavares could owe. The CRA reassessed Tavares' 2018 income and said it was about $17.8 million higher than what he had reported. The reassessment resulted in about $6.8 million in additional tax and roughly $1.2 million in interest. Together, that pushed the dispute to around $8 million. The next question is even more important. Why was so much of the contract paid through signing bonuses? Tavares' contract was not built like a normal deal with most of the money coming from yearly salary. A very large part came through bonuses. His legal team says this structure was part of the deal that convinced him to leave the United States and sign with Toronto. The CRA, however, says the payment was still connected to his work for the Maple Leafs. That is the heart of this case. It is not simply a fight about whether Tavares should pay taxes. Both sides agree that tax was owed. The fight is about how that specific payment should be classified under the Canada-US tax treaty. Tavares says the 2018 payment was an inducement to sign the contract. The CRA says it should be treated as employment income. That difference is what created the huge tax bill. There has already been an important legal development in the case. In March 2026, the Tax Court of Canada rejected a CRA request to question a representative from Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment about the signing bonus. The judge said the government had not shown that it needed this extra examination to get the information it wanted. The court also awarded Tavares costs for that motion. But this was only a procedural decision. It did not decide whether Tavares or the CRA is correct on the tax issue itself. Now Tavares is giving evidence directly in court, putting the spotlight back on the deal that brought him home to Toronto. His testimony gives the court more detail about what he wanted, what Toronto offered, and how the contract came together. If Tavares wins, the case could strengthen the use of signing bonuses as a way for Canadian sports teams to attract players. If the CRA wins, teams and players could face more questions about how these large payments are classified. The final decision could therefore matter not only to Tavares, but to future NHL contracts across Canada. Everyone thought Gavin McKenna would become Toronto's next superstar the moment he arrived. But the Maple Leafs gave him a message that shocked everyone, and it completely changed his future. What they told him, behind the scenes, could reshape everything fans expected. A player expected to become the face of Toronto arrived with a very different assignment. Gavin McKenna entered the Maple Leafs organization after being selected first overall in the 2026 NHL draft, but the message from team officials was not about rushing him into a starring role. From his first day in Toronto, the focus stayed on development, patience, and building for the future. That direction quickly changed the conversation around his place in the organization. The first overall pick always brings high expectations. Toronto made McKenna the top selection because of his production, skating, vision, and complete game. But the organization also spoke about qualities that do not appear on a score sheet. During his first media appearances, McKenna described the moment as a dream. He said, "It's pretty surreal." The excitement around the selection was clear, but the club also made it clear that his next steps would follow a long-term plan rather than a fast track to NHL stardom. That plan became more visible only days later. McKenna reported to the Maple Leafs development camp instead of preparing for immediate NHL action. The camp placed him with coaches, prospects, and player development staff. The sessions focused on skating drills, systems, fitness testing, and learning how the organization operates. Those details show that Toronto viewed him as a player who would be developed step by step instead of being placed under instant pressure. The organization also controlled expectations from the start. Development camp was not presented as a competition for an NHL roster spot. Instead, it became the first stage of a much larger process. Coaches worked with McKenna on daily habits, practice routines, and learning the pace expected at the professional level. Those early decisions matched the message delivered throughout draft weekend. But another detail received even more attention. Toronto officials repeatedly pointed toward McKenna's character. Reports following the draft highlighted his maturity and how he handled the spotlight that comes with becoming the first overall pick. Playing in Toronto brings constant media coverage and one of the largest fan bases in hockey. The organization did not describe that pressure as something to fear. Instead, it presented it as part of the environment McKenna would gradually learn to manage. And that became another important part of his role. His arrival also came during an important period for the franchise. The Maple Leafs already have established NHL stars, including captain Auston Matthews. That meant McKenna was not entering a team searching for one player to solve every problem. Instead, Toronto's structure allowed him to develop alongside experienced leaders. Rather than carrying the team immediately, his role became learning from players who already understand the demands of competing in the NHL. But that was only one layer of the organization's thinking. McKenna also addressed the attention surrounding his arrival. During his first days with Toronto, he acknowledged the excitement around becoming the top pick. He said, "It's pretty surreal." The quote reflected the scale of the moment, while also showing that his attention had already shifted toward the work ahead. Public celebration quickly gave way to structured development inside the organization. The Maple Leafs have followed similar approaches with many young players in recent years. Development has become a central part of building an NHL roster. Rather than asking prospects to carry immediate expectations, the club has often focused on improving skills over time. McKenna entered that same system. His first assignment was not leading the team in scoring. It was learning how the organization wants its players to grow before reaching the next level. Reports covering his arrival also showed another important point. Toronto repeatedly connected McKenna's future with patience instead of speed. Coaches and executives discussed preparation, growth, and long-term success rather than immediate production. Those comments align with the activities at development camp, where the emphasis remained on teaching instead of rushing. The message stayed consistent from draft night through his first practices. Outside, Observers also noticed that approach. Analysis following the draft pointed to McKenna's leadership qualities alongside his skill. Several reports suggested that Toronto viewed those traits as important parts of its future. His role extended beyond putting the puck in the net. Leadership, preparation, and adapting to the organization's culture became central themes during his first week with the club, and that attention continued to grow. The timing also mattered. Toronto entered a new chapter after adding the first overall selection to a roster that already featured established NHL talent. That combination gave the organization flexibility. McKenna could develop without carrying every expectation alone. Veteran players remained in place while the prospect learned the professional game. That structure allowed the organization to think years ahead rather than only one season ahead. From draft night through development camp, the facts remained consistent. Gavin McKenna arrived as the first overall pick. He entered one of hockey's biggest markets. Toronto immediately focused on development, learning, and long-term planning. Hall of Fame executive Jim Devellano described him as a possible foundation player for the franchise. McKenna called the moment pretty surreal. Those statements, combined with the organization's actions, showed that his first role in Toronto was not to become the team's instant superstar. His first role was to become the player the Maple Leafs believe can anchor the franchise for years to come, while the next stage of that plan continued behind the scenes. One simple photo has Maple Leafs fans talking again, and the internet is filled with one big question. Why were Mitch Marner and Auston Matthews standing together after everything that happened? The images spread fast, emotions exploded, and fans started wondering if this reunion means more than just friendship. But before jumping to conclusions, there's an important part of this story that almost everyone is missing. Mitch Marner may now wear the colors of the Vegas Golden Knights, but one recent post reminded hockey fans of his years with the Toronto Maple Leafs. During the NHL offseason, Marner shared a group of photos from his summer on social media. At first, the pictures looked like normal offseason memories, but one photo quickly caught everyone's attention. It showed Marner standing with Auston Matthews and several former Maple Leafs teammates during Frederik Andersen's wedding celebration. Within hours, the picture was being shared across hockey pages, and fans everywhere started talking about what it could mean. For many Maple Leafs fans, seeing Marner and Matthews together again brought back a lot of memories. The two stars spent years playing on the same team. They celebrated exciting wins, fought through tough playoff losses, and became two of the biggest faces of the franchise. Even though Marner has now started a new chapter with the Vegas Golden Knights, the friendship between the former teammates was clear in the wedding photos. The smiles and relaxed moments show that time together away from the ice can still bring old teammates together. The wedding itself made the reunion even more special. Frederik Andersen was not just another teammate. During his years with Toronto, Andersen became one of the team's most trusted goalies and shared many important moments with both Marner and Matthews. Over the years, Andersen and Marner have spoken warmly about their friendship. Even after Andersen left Toronto, they stayed in touch. That made his wedding the perfect place for former teammates to meet again, celebrate together, and enjoy time away from hockey. As the photos spread online, fans quickly began creating their own stories. Some people wondered if the reunion meant Marner missed Toronto. Others asked if Matthews wanted his former teammate back with the Maple Leafs one day. A few even suggested that something bigger could be happening behind the scenes. But it is important to separate excitement from facts. There has been no announcement about Marner returning to Toronto. There has been no report of contract talks, trade discussions, or secret meetings. The gathering happened because close friends came together to celebrate a wedding, not because of NHL business. It is also important to understand what these photos do not mean. Since Marner joined the Vegas Golden Knights, some fans have hoped he could return to Toronto one day. Others have wondered if he still keeps in touch with his former teammates. The wedding photos answered one question. Yes, the friendships are still there. But they did not answer another question that many fans continue asking. There has been no official report that Marner wants to return to the Maple Leafs. There have been no trade talks announced, no contract discussions, and no sign that this reunion had anything to do with hockey business. It was a private celebration shared with friends, Frederik Andersen's wedding gave everyone a chance to step away from the pressure of the NHL. During the season, players compete against each other